Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Director's Desk. So Catherine and I today are going to be discussing strategic workforce planning and just exploring what is it at a very basic level, what are the benefits, what are the challenges. And again, the reason we're doing these podcasts, Catherine and I have got nearly 25 years experience. I know we look very young, but we do have 25 years nearly of experience within people, HR, people management, workforce strategy and many other areas, working, luckily enough, for some amazing organisations through our careers, and just keen to share this with you. So today's podcast, chapter 1, because I think strategic workforce planning is quite a deep topic, and there will be a few more episodes to cover this, but we'll just start with a very basic overview of exactly what it is.
Perfect. That's right. Really excited about this subject today. And as Bina had said previously, we are going to have probably part 1, part 2, part 3 of this, because it is a vast subject and a lot of companies are talking about it more so now than they have done in the past. So, SWP in short is about aligning your workforce strategy and your workforce planning to your business planning and business strategy. It's about ensuring that you have the right people with the right skills in the right place at the right time. And that's in short. But what it really is about, kind of long term, which we're going to be talking about in more detail, is about preparing your organisation for future success.
And it's an interesting one, because I think a lot of our listeners who probably haven't experienced strategic workforce planning were saying, surely most organisations do that. Yeah. So how they recruit and how they hire is based around the commercial strategy and the business strategy. But as we both know, it's not. For many organisations, it's a bit of a siloed approach of, there's a role, we've had this role for 40 years, and when that person leaves, we just replace them. And it is surprising when we do talk about this, working for the organisations we have and our networks, how different the approach is in different organisations. Yeah. And it is about preparing, a bit like you preparing for that dinner party we went to. Catherine was meant to be having this really nice 6-course meal. What happened, Catherine, with your preparation?
Well, I ordered...
What did you order?
A very, very posh pizza.
What happened to the preparation?
Well, that was that strategic. I was planning for success by ensuring that my my guests were fed.
They were amazing posh pizzas, though.
They were amazing posh pizzas.
Yeah, going off track slightly, but yes, preparation-wise. But yes, you're completely right that the strategic workforce planning is about making the right decisions at the right time to avoid last-minute scrambles. Yeah. Last-minute scrambles. I mean, gosh, how many times have we sat in organisations over the last 10, 15 years where we know Mary's going on maternity in 9 months? When do we start recruiting? A week before.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's what strategic workforce is broadly, because it's a lot more detailed than that. But it is that strategy of who you need where. And as the business changes and evolves, your strategy should change and evolve.
Yeah. And it is about, analysing the workforce needs of your organisation in the forefront. So being more proactive and thinking about being proactive more so than obviously your, example there, the reactive, quick, all hands on deck, quick bums on seats. It is about that. And I think what strategic workforce planning allows you to do is it supports you bridging any gaps by being a lot more analytical around what you have and your future needs based on, what your business or, what your company is going to look like in the future or what you want it to look like in the future. So there are so many implications to it and so many questions around it.
And I suppose, from our experience and our networks and the conversations we have around it, it can be a huge challenge. And I know we're going to go into that in a bit more detail, but it can be incredibly hard for organisations that don't think beyond 12 months to be able to think about, what is our workforce in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Normally, you would want to plan out for 5 years to try and understand where that is. And it's let's say it's much easier not to do strategic workforce planning because it is a hard concept, and you've got to get all the stakeholders around the table who know and understand. And I think that's probably why a lot of business struggle to implement it.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, with that, when you talk about the thinking 5 years out or 10 years out in some cases, depending on the business from where you are right now, it's also thinking about, are you doing it for pocket? Are you doing it kind of for your business wide, or are you going to start doing it for pockets of your business to really understand what you need in the future or what you want in the future, playing out some of the scenarios? I think one of the things that really plays a huge part in strategic workforce planning now more than ever is skills. So what will the future work look like in your company, and then what are the future skills that align to that? So and that's another thing that I think companies find really difficult, because obviously we've spoken about the advancements of AI and future skills, and companies are still trying to understand, what does that mean for my business?
And I think the other angle from this is, if you get strategic workforce planning right, you can probably, and I have seen data around this, reduce the attrition within your organisation because you're planning ahead, you're reskilling your people, you are moving it to where the demand is. But again, it goes back to, is your organisation able to produce a plan of where is the work coming from? What are the patterns of work? What are the skill sets that we need around that pattern of work? Unless it can do that. But if it can do that and you invest in that, you can go, okay, we can move our people around. And retention, your talent team are less stressed because it's more proactive instead of reactive. Your learning and development team are aligned because they are, again, more proactive. They know the skills that they're building, and it's not that last minute scramble to try and recruit. And we've got to face this, that our workforce is shrinking. The size of our workforce is shrinking. Our birth rates are reducing. There's a much older population. So the naivety that you're always going to be able to buy the skills in, we've got to face it, people, that those skills are not going to be there.
Yeah.
You're going to have to retrain your people. But I get it. I get that employers, it's a lot of hassle retraining instead of just buying the skill in.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as we know, in the conversations we're having, and we've heard that a lot in our networks, a lot of employers that, no, we'll just buy the skills in. There will be a point that you won't be able to do that, or you will, but it's so competitive, the cost will outweigh the benefit of that role. So we've got to be smarter, and I think that's where strategic workforce planning comes in. Yeah,
absolutely. I am just on your point there about some companies. I've had like in the last month, I've had 2 businesses and individuals that are very, very senior in talent and HR reach out to me to ask for my ideas on kind of what SWP is. And these companies and these individuals that are running these companies are in their area are phenomenal, like literally tech savvy, thinking ahead, super commercial. And what's really interesting is they're kind of trying to think of it being so complicated and over complicating it. Whereas I think, to your point, thinking, about the concept of what do you want to look like in the future? So asking those initial questions, what work is going to be done in the future? Where are you going to be location. So what does the location strategy look like? How much are you going to grow? So actually having those clear assumptions at the beginning, and that really supports simplifying the process, I think, like having those conversations. And those individuals I spoke to hadn't thought that way.
Okay.
So that was interesting.
Yeah. It is a minefield, and it won't work for every organisation. I mean, for some organisations, we know, let's be honest, it's a lot more challenging to get a strategic workforce planning concept in smaller organisations, medium organisations, maybe partnerships compared to a corporate, because of the structure of those organisations. And those organisations probably don't have a view of what the pipeline is or the targeted pipeline. And it's not lined up broadly. But I think what we're saying is strategic workforce planning has to line up against your financial ambitions, your business ambitions, and everything you recruit and employ in the business is aligned to that skill. So as you said earlier, it's the right people in the right place at the right time. And it's not an easy concept. It's not something that can be done over a lunch break with a bunch of people. It's an investment. But the data that we'll go through shortly shows that the investment is worth it. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, the engagement and retention of employees in a business that's a skills-led organisation, focusing on strategic workforce planning, is better. Because when you have a strategic workforce strategy in an organisation, you are naturally looking to reinvest in your people. And that's where the retention engagement comes from.
Absolutely. And actually, let's, on that point, Veena, let's talk about why this matters. So, and particularly we focus on the UK. So, according to a report by the Office for National Statistics, the UK's working age population is shrinking and the competition for skilled talent is intensifying. This makes strategic workforce planning not just a nice to have, but a business imperative.
Is that not what I just said?
Oh, it is. It is.
Yeah.
And that is fact. So, and actually,
But
just
that is a
aligns with
fact.
what you're saying. It is a fact.
It is a fact. It wasn't just a Beaner
No,
viewpoint.
it is.
I'm glad it aligns. And a recent study from the 2023 Chartered Institute of Personal Development, the CIPD, found that 72% of UK employees are struggling to find the skills that they need right now.
Yeah.
And we are seeing it.
We are seeing it, and we're hearing it as well.
And this highlights the importance of that proactiveness that we mentioned. You've got to be proactive. You can't just bury your heads in the sand.
No.
And it will continue to change. The UK workforce, the age dynamics will mean less and less supply. And it's not just about paying more money, because there is a financial piece where there's a ceiling to what salaries are.
Yeah.
It's about how we do this. And I think it puts a lot of pressure on our learning and development teams, our recruiting teams, and our HR functions to get this right. But I think a lot of businesses will have to overhaul these functions to try and get that nurturing development and retraining. It's a really hard concept for many people. I mean, I talk to a lot of people who are struggling to hire. There's roles that have been out for 6 months, 12 months. And I'm like, as we know with our recruitment hats on from back in the day, it's like, the job spec's wrong. No, the job spec isn't wrong. They are looking for a unicorn, or that skill is no longer in the market and you have to build it yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, looking at the tech giants, they are still very, very reliant on bringing that skill set from offshore. And again, that is not sustainable. And a lot of them are investing in recruiting and training their own. And it has to be a comprehensive program. We both know of organisations that are trying to do the same, but they haven't got the expertise to do it and they haven't got the right people in place. And all it's doing is damaging brand and not working. So you've got to get it right. You've got to invest now.
You do. And I think business, you talked about HR functions as well there. I think business leaders need to be aligned and engaged in it as well. I mean, there are some very, very good examples of companies who are doing strategic workforce planning. So we've got Siemens, for example.
Okay.
So, I know a few people there, and I've got some notes from a conversation I had. So they've developed a really comprehensive workforce planning strategy that includes everything from predictive analytics to targeted training programs. So that has all been built in. And as a result, they've been able to ensure, they have kind of a real steady pipeline of skilled workers, even in, the face of we thinking about that industry is evolving and changing all the time. So they've been able to do that.
That's brilliant. I think Unilever is actually another organisation. So I was reading about a case study in Unilever. So that they're pretty good, Unilever, at a lot of things. And they've got this advanced workforce planning tool that has been developed over the years that aligns their talent strategy with their business goals. And this has helped them to adapt to market changes quite quickly and stay competitive.
Yeah.
A bit like succession planning, but on steroids, right?
Yes.
It's a different concept, but there is organisations. I think Johnson & Johnson are another that have landed strategic workforce planning quite well. It's really interesting because I was at an event recently in London that I was invited to. Really great event with some quite high profile HR leaders and tech leaders. And strategic workforce planning was discussed very briefly. I was in the room, and it was seen as a bit of a nonsense approach.
Wow.
Of it's something that can only be done in a gig economy, and it's not something that's reachable for a lot of organisations. It is a passion of mine, and I think it's something that should work. And I think globally there is around 25 organisations, large big corporates, that are trying to build a skills first strategic workforce, which makes complete sense. So I don't think it's a farcical concept. I don't think it's for everyone, and it's certainly not for Bob, who's got 25 people that work for him in Yorkshire.
No.
But it is for those large corporates where we know, not just in the UK, but global talent is shrinking. It's a concept that we need to get on board with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it doesn't just come, without those hurdles, right? And I said before, getting the business leadership buy-in is really, really important. And I think there needs to be that shift in mindset. So I think, I said at the beginning around thinking more longer term, which is really hard for people to do. Like,
Yes.
even though people are thinking, yes, I'm strategic, that strategic mindset is kind of 3 years. I've spoken to other businesses about this, and they find it, and they find getting their leaders to think differently and think 5 years plus ahead, and the shift in skills, economic factors as well, is very difficult. So it is, how do we educate our business leaders to change their mindset?
Yeah, I think that's a really important one. I mean, just touching on that, I think, let's be honest, our business strategies and where that comes, we have the most important players in any business strategy are finance, sales, and operations. And I think a lot of those gaps from the conversations we're having and seeing are with that sales piece. We know what the sales industry is like in organisations, having been involved in sales, quite a bit. It's a very short thinking. It's a very short term. It's very KPI focused on the immediate. But having owned my own recruitment business a long time ago, and this is a conversation I was having with a contact recently, I could have sat down and given you a projected pipeline of the pattern of work. But it's having the time to do that. And sales is very reactive. It's like, just go and get the work. But it's analysing it. And again, where a lot of organisations fall short is that data. And we're seeing that with strategic workforce planning, you have to have consistent, comprehensive data.
Yeah, absolutely.
And where a lot of teams work in silos, and where that data isn't there because sales are just told to go and sell and there's no comprehensive strategy, that's what stops you planning effectively for strategic workforce planning. And a lot of our organisations will try it and just go, actually, it's too hard to achieve, and stop. But if you can get the data right, we're not talking about 100% accuracy, but real, not a back of a fag packet approach, where the data is there that you can work with, the benefits are immense.
Yeah, they really are. And I think, obviously we said about, some of the data around, what tech is telling us, environmental factors, economic changes. But I think having that real external lens is so important. A lot of businesses I've spoken to recently, when I've been at roundtables or, panel discussions, they've been very insular in just thinking about their business here and now. And actually, you need to think about what is happening out here. So to your point, obviously, from the recruitment lens, I mean, when I was, agency side, you were constantly looking at the external market and advising the companies you were working for on behalf of,
absolutely.
actually what is happening out there. And actually those factors play a huge part.
As a basic roundup, strategic workforce planning is worth the investment. However, you have to have, as you said, Catherine, everyone on board. You need the stakeholders to be really genuinely invested. It will make your business more proactive. But there is an investment about getting the right data. It's an investment about understanding the external market. And it's not something that can be done overnight. It's a consistent process. Unlike finance, it's something that can be tweaked.
Yes.
Alongside your commercial strategy. But I think more and more businesses will need to look at this because of the shrinking size of our workforce, unless you've got mega bucks to pay everyone.
Yeah, 100%. And I also think it's about kind of relaying back, you know, what is it as a business? You know, what do we want to be known for? You know, how, you know, thinking about those assumptions, but also, you know, what are we trying to solve in the long run?
Yeah.
You know, what is the problem we're trying to resolve, and always reflecting back on that.
Yeah.
Because things do change, things do evolve.
Yes, and you're completely right. And I think for the organisations out there that feel that actually it's too hard, we can't plan, we don't have the time, I think even if you try to start looking at strategic workforce planning, you may not have a plan, but let's plan. Why don't you sit down and have a look at what is your sales plan? Is there industries that you want to focus on? All of that information will help you try and develop some level of a strategic workforce plan.
Totally.
I'm not going to go into all that detail because we said this is part 1 of part 3, but we will go into that on another occasion. Hope this has been helpful. It's our bread and butter in terms of what we do, but we wanted to make it as simple as possible in terms of what the basics of strategic workforce planning are. But thank you so much for listening to the Director's Desk. It's been a here, and
Catherine Bell here. We've loved talking about this subject. Again, I know I've said before, do, you know,
absolutely,
any comments you do have, if you disagree with what we're saying, we love it. We love a challenge. Throw it our way.
Please do. Thank you so much, and we'll speak to you soon.